Hi, everyone. Welcome on. I know that was a quick break, so we'll let folks get in and get started. A couple housekeeping reminders. If you are streaming it from the lobby, there should be a purple join button, and if you click that, you'll be able to access all of the Q&A tools and chat and things like that. Um, and just in addition, if you do join that way, make sure that the other session is muted because otherwise it will echo. And then also please put all of your questions in the Q&A. Our team is going to be answering those. And then any that we don't get to, we'll be able to export and get back in touch with you. We're not able to do that in the chat feature, so we recommend doing that. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Katarina.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone, for our follow-up session. So we will just continue where John left off. So we have talked about what is Kubernetes and some basics. And what we'll do in this session is show you how we can use this in VMware Cloud Foundation. So thank you very much for joining us. I will start with a little bit of presentation, then we'll jump into an actual live demonstration. Let me just quickly start this. So again, I don't want to spend too much time talking about slides and talking about the theory. But I guess we just need to, again, level set. Why are we here? What are we talking about? And we can all agree that everything is about the application. Workloads are no longer about, creating a Kubernetes cluster or deploying a virtual machine. The modern apps need way more than just that. But we also need an ecosystem that is not able to just support it, but also to be able to grow with the ever-evolving space of Kubernetes. And that's why what I want to very quickly cover in this first section are some of the main services that we have available in VCF. Just to quickly introduce them, just to level set everyone, and then we will jump straight into an environment where we will start deploying these, and I'll show you how you can use these in real life and give you some tips. So first of all, the most important service, I guess, that we need to cover, and we're all here to listen about, is VKS, which is our vSphere Kubernetes Service. And I just want to really quickly introduce what VKS is, because it's a really important part of the story. We've been talking about Kubernetes and what that is and what is a Kubernetes cluster. And what VKS gives you is the ability to deploy these fully conformant Kubernetes clusters that are really easy to manage and scale and deploy, and they come with all of these benefits, which, again, I won't be covering in the slides, but I will try to show you in a live demonstration. But there are some benefits of choosing VKS, maybe over some of the other solutions, with the way we have implemented this, integrated it into your environment, into environment and user interfaces that you've been working with for a long time, that you are familiar with. Because as we have seen in the poll in the beginning, we know that this is a very complex topic if this is something that you are new to. So we are trying really, really hard to make these concepts easier for you to navigate and to understand and to be able to use it. So that's one of the main benefits, but obviously the solution comes with lots others, like our long-term supports for versions, like the ability of having multiple versions deployed, the sizing, the scaling, and I'll show you all of that. But one really important thing that we need to cover when we talk about Kubernetes is Kubernetes releases. Just so you understand, every Kubernetes cluster is deployed using a certain version. And this is something that in the world of Kubernetes changes really, really quickly. While Kubernetes has been around for 11 years now, we are still on version 1.35 at the moment, but it is something that usually gets a release every 3 months or so. And we have done a lot of work in order to be able to keep up with this. And we were able to deliver on the promise. So when we release our vSphere Kubernetes service, we are doing that to stay on top with the latest releases of the upstream Kubernetes releases as well. And just to give you a brief idea of how quick this is, on this slide, I just have the last 4 versions that we have released. And as you can see, it's very rapid. Every version brings us not only new version of Kubernetes, but usually new functionality that you can do on these clusters. That's why it's really important to kind of like stay on top in this. in this space. The most recent one we just released in February was our VCAS release 3.6, which gives us access again to Kubernetes 1.35, which is fully aligned with upstream Kubernetes, but also some new improvements as well. So we will see some of that stuff today. But Kubernetes is one aspect of the story. Most of you are probably familiar with the VM space. And while we do tend to talk about containers the most nowadays, because we know the majority of new app development is happening in containers, virtual machines are not going away. And we need to be able to manage them and maybe look at some of the principles that we can take from the world of Kubernetes and apply it for those other workloads that we still need. And for example, for that, we give you VM Service. And what that is the ability to deploy virtual machines, as you have been doing, at this time using these kind of Kubernetes constructs. And again, it's something that I will be showing you so you can understand this, how it works. But the idea, again, being is that you are using this kind of declarative desired state that you define for your virtual machine in a manifest, in a configuration, and then this is being kept by the system. So it's really just slightly changing the way we think and maybe deploy and manage virtual machines, really trying to take the benefit of the world of Kubernetes. And why this is important? Well, not only does it mean that, hey, there are some new cool things we can do with virtual machines, but also it means that if we use the same APIs to manage everything, whether it's a container, Kubernetes cluster, or a virtual machine, it allows us to use more of those tools that were on that really big slide that John had with the ecosystem of CNCF. So for example, if you, in your organization, are doing some GitOps patterns, maybe you want to introduce some continuous delivery, you can pick one of the most popular projects in CNCF, ArgoCD, and use it on our platform to deploy not just Kubernetes clusters, not just container workloads, but now also virtual machines or load balancers or storage or anything that you're doing on your platform, all using the same tools, the same target. And that really, in my mind, shows the true power of why something like embedding something like this Kubernetes ecosystem into an environment is so powerful, because it goes beyond just one type of workload. And again, I don't want to go through the details here in this kind of slide presentation. I will be showing you in our real environment. And I want to say that again. What I will be doing a live demonstration in my labs. What does that mean? Everything will be real time, because I want to be able to explain to you what is happening and also show you real time what's happening on the background and so on. It may mean that there may be maybe some typos, mistakes, as things happen, but hopefully I really want this to be really kind of interactive for you, so you can see what's happening and I can explain it better that way, and maybe share some tips and tricks that I can from these environments. So with that, let me quickly jump into my environment. I'll just nicely share this. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm logged into a VCF environment that has been fully configured. And the reason why I'm doing this is because in this session, I really want to show you the kind of consumption experience. So you're a user, how do you use these services without going into the details of how this is all kind of like implemented and managed. That's something that we will cover in part 2, which will be coming just right after this session. So I really want to start from the beginning, just to give you an idea of how we have built this. So in our VCF 9 deployment, we have really tried to make this cloud experience available in your private environment. And that's why we are heavily utilizing our VCF automation portal, which no longer means only just automating workflows, but think of it more as a cloud portal as your entry into services. So what I will do now as a user, this has been configured for me. I have my user account and I've been given access to this environment. So once I log in, what I'm kind of greeted with is some overview of what is available to me, what I can use, most importantly, the services. This is what we will be doing now. Namespaces that have been created. So John has mentioned this concept of a namespace in the world of Kubernetes. And we kind of took that concept as well and integrated it into vSphere. And what it means is that we use a vSphere namespace as this kind of little isolation block that allows you to assign permissions to these spaces, assign resource, maybe some quotas and limitations on the resource, and do some other further configuration. So you can deploy your workloads into these little isolated chunks, let's call them. But that will become more apparent as we are switching through them. I just wanted to highlight that here. So here I see I have access to this production namespace, and I have all of these services available. And as I said, the first one we want to be looking at is Kubernetes. So let's jump straight in. So this is our VKS. As you can see, I'm in my standard interface. Let's start with deployment of a new cluster. And this, again, is really, really simple in the user interface. I just go into create mode. And I'm going to, if I wanted to create a cluster really, really quickly, in 2 clicks, I could use the default configuration. I want to show you some other things, so I will choose custom now. Then I get to configure some basic settings. So as we will be going through this, I will not cover every single one, but I will highlight some of the most important ones. So for example, I want to give my cluster a name that I want to choose rather than the one that was automatically generated. And then I get to choose the release that I want to use. And this goes back to what I was mentioning with the Kubernetes releases being released really, really fast. So what you will see is that we have all of these different versions that are available for you to use. For now, I will use the latest, which is the 135. I could do some additional extra configuration on the clusters, including rotation of my certificates and things like that. But to keep it really, really simple in this first example, let's move on to the configuration of the control plane. So as John has explained, every Kubernetes cluster has a control plane and has worker nodes. The control plane being the master brain of the operations, running all of the kind of management services. So I can say that I want to have one of those. And here with the VM class, that's a concept that we use to define resources that will be allocated to this control plane. So with this sizing, which is this kind of t-shirt sizing you would see in any cloud providers, I can say that I want to give this control plane 2 CPUs, 4 gigs of memory. Next, I select a storage class. And I will show you in kind of the vSphere world how this links, but this is basically just a storage policy that is defining which data store should be used for deployment. And for operating systems, I can choose from either Photon or Ubuntu, which are the 2 that we distribute for control plane. I'll just leave it as Photon for now. And now I come to the configuration of node pools. Now, node pools are pooling together the worker nodes. So again, first example, keeping it really, really simple, I will create a node pool with 1 worker node. So I will keep 1 replica. And again, it predefines some configuration for me, the same sizing, the storage policy that should be used, the operating system, and so on. So for this example, let's just keep that as is. And now the most incredible part of all of this is that, as you have seen, it's really simple to kind of navigate the user interface. But everything in Kubernetes is defined in this desired state. The desired state is captured in a manifest that is written in YAML. Now, YAML is notoriously hard to work with if you're not familiar with it, and to try to create it from scratch can be quite daunting. So one of my favorite features in our user interfaces is that we create these manifests for you automatically. So as you will see, everything that I have kind of selected in my configuration has been captured in this YAML manifest here on the right side. And what is also really cool, I can go and download this at this point. So if I want to later maybe redeploy this cluster, I can just use the manifest and maybe use the CLI, or I can use it in some other use cases, which we will cover as well. So I will go ahead and click Finish. And now, as you will see, my cluster is being created. So this will now go through various statuses until the cluster will be ready to be used. But I want to kind of like show you what's under the hood. So let's quickly jump into our vSphere UI, which is something that most of you will be familiar with the most. In my inventory, you can see I have that vSphere namespace that I mentioned called production. And in there, we can see that I have now a kind of resource pool for this VKS cluster that is automatically created. And what is happening is that the system is currently pulling the image to deploy the control plane of that Kubernetes cluster. So we can see that was syncing, and now it's deploying that OVF template for that first control plane node. And while this is running, I want to, again, to be able to show you the relationship. You see that it is fetching this from a content library. So the way we distribute VKRs, so the Kubernetes releases, is through a subscribed content library. We create this one automatically when you enable the system. And what we do is you will be able to see all of the Kubernetes releases that are publicly available in here. So if we scroll through this, you will see that we have, well, currently loads and loads of various images available in there. We, by default, configure this content library to only sync images when they are needed. So you don't have to be worried about downloading hundreds of images that you don't really need in your kind of environment. Only the ones that you do need. If we go back to the inventory, we will see that it is kind of like fetching the image, it is transferring the files. Now we will see that it is configuring the machine, powering it on. And once it powers on the control plane VM, it will start doing the configuration of the cluster on that control plane. And that's why you see that there's so far only one virtual machine. All of the worker nodes will be deployed after the first control plane machine is deployed. So we will wait for this one to be configured, and then we will see that there's another virtual machine being deployed, and that will be used by the worker node. If we go back into our view here, let me just quickly reload that and refresh. We will see that this status needs to change to ready. It's been 2 minutes so far, so we're doing well. While that is running, I also want to show you how you can kind of like check, let me clear this, how you can check what is available to you as a consumer, also using your CLIs. So in VCF 9, we have introduced this unified CLI that is called VCF CLI that we use to create context mapping to those vSphere namespaces and allowing you to kind of like working with the resources that are there and do all of the operations in there. So if I check what I have available, let me just go to my production. Oh, sorry. That was production, but let me change it to this one. You will see that it is asking me for an API token. Because this is connecting through this VCF automation, it uses an API token that I have defined as a user under my account. If we go in there, there are API tokens where you can create your token that will be then used for authentication of your user. The reason why we need this is because the contacts that you create are automatically updated with access information to, to know which namespaces you have access to, which projects, and so on. So just so you know where to kind of like look for that thing and where to create it. So it's asking me for a token. I do have it saved. So I'm just going to copy this in here. Okay. And now I'm using my production namespace. So let me see if I list my clusters. I will see that my production 01 is currently still creating, but my control plane is already ready. The worker nodes are still kind of deploying. The reason why you see a ready state in here is because this is reflecting the status of that control plane. That's why it will show as ready as soon as the control plane is deployed. But in order to deploy workloads, we need to wait for the work nodes to be deployed. And as you can see now, it is currently working on that. It's deploying that work node we defined, it's powering it on, and it will do the configuration. But while that is running, we can try to connect to this cluster. I have just noticed that I had a leftover context created. Let me just show you how to do this. Okay. One thing I would like to mention, and we'll get to that later on, we will be also kind of providing you a way of being able to get your hands-on experience with this through our labs, where we will also give you instructions on how to do certain tasks. And just so you don't have to watch me type so many things in, I will be quickly just copying in command to make it easier for all of us. So the first thing I need to do, I know my cluster is there. The control plane is up. I need to register this kind of authenticator that will allow me to access this cluster. I just need to give it the name of the cluster to do that. And then I will get the kubeconfig for this cluster and import it into the kubeconfig I have. Without making that sound too complex, kubeconfig is basically a file that defines which clusters you have access to, with which user, and what kind of permissions you have. So again, I just need to use the correct name here. So now I can access this using it. And now I can I will just get specific information from that kubeconfig file that I have now merged for my cluster, which is here. And then I can create a context. I'm trying to show you this process just so you know how to create these contexts for the clusters, because it will make your life much easier later on. While this is a bit of work when you deploy the cluster the first time, once you have the context available, you can just very easily switch into it, and it makes your life easier when you're working with this workload. So I'm just going to use this, which is defining the cluster I need access to. Again, I just need to give it the right name. So I go in here, and we do have two types of contexts. The one that we want to be using in this scenario, using this VCFA token, is the cloud consumption interface. So I'm going to do that. And again, I'm creating the class, the context with that token I showed you before. It's always the same one. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to refresh this as is recommended. And now I can, when I use context use, I can switch myself to that cluster. So what I have basically now done, I have repointed my VCF CLI to that cluster that I have deployed. So now when I'm running my kubectl command, it will be running within the space of the cluster. So if I do kubectl get nodes, you will see that I have 2 nodes. So I have my control plane and I have my worker node, and these are now both ready. So by the time I did all this, my cluster was fully deployed. So as you can see, it's a matter of just a few minutes. So now that I'm in my Kubernetes cluster, I want to deploy some kind of workload. What I can do in here is, as a best practice, I would say, is I want to create a namespace within the Kubernetes cluster. Again, to put my application into one little space. So I will go ahead and I will create namespace called demo. Now, when it comes to the ability to deploy workloads on Kubernetes, Kubernetes defines security policies that define what kind of workload you are able to run, depending on various levels. I want to just allow this to run anything I can show you at the moment. So I'm just going to quickly label it with that specific access, which again, I do have a cheat here, so I don't have to type it out. And it uses the form of a label, which is a standard thing in Kubernetes to define things. So I'm going to label this with my pod security policy set to privileged. Now I'm able to deploy my workload. So to show you something very simple, I have prepared a very simple very simple deployment. This is the construct that John was explaining. So it will be just deploying an Nginx container, and it will do some very specific configuration of my website saying hello VMware, and also fronted with a load balancer so we can access it. So this is my definition that I have created, and now I can just apply this into that namespace. So I will do that. And I can see that all those resources were created for me. And now what I can do is, if I do kubectl get all in the namespace, this will show me all of the resources that are deployed in there. As you can see, it was very, very quick. So I have my pod that is deployed with Nginx. I have my load balancer, which is fronting it, so I can access it on this external IP. I have the deployment it's captured in, and the replica set that is defining that one replica of that pod. So now if we just do curl, just to keep it easy, on that IP address, we can see that we're getting back our hello VMware. So that was very quick demonstration of how you would install an application or workload. Again, the beauty of Kubernetes is that everything is kind of unified. So you would use this exact same process to deploy from the very basic apps to a very complex one as well. The other thing that's really interesting in this implementation of VKS is that we've deployed a cluster. We are able to deploy a workload. But as I mentioned in the beginning, that's not enough because the applications of today need way more things. So you may want to introduce some other packages to be able to introduce some other functionality to your Kubernetes cluster, maybe that isn't available by default. And in order to do that, we have this concept of VKS standard packages. So again, this is something that we package and release and support, and you can go and download and install them. We publish them in a repo. Again, I'll just copy it in so you don't have to watch me type that. But as you can see, again, we're using that VCF CLI for management of these packages. We are adding a repository with the URL that is pointing to our packages, and this is the latest release we have available. So this will now go ahead and reconcile this request and configure this for me. And we can see that has been deployed. and then I can quickly check what is available. So if I check what packages are available for me, here's a list of what is currently available in the repo. So we have things like AKO, so that's your AVI Kubernetes operator. If you're using AVI Load Balancer, you can install on your clusters. If you have layer 7 requirements for your apps. Cert Manager, for example. Some of the packages we now also install automatically, which I will show you next, like for example, Cluster Autoscaler. Or some other solutions that, again, you can use here. For example, again, Telegraph and Prometheus are used to pass data from your VKS clusters to VCF operations if you want to get metrics on your workloads and what's happening inside of your VKS clusters. So that was a quick kind of demonstration on this first cluster that we have deployed. But as I said, the beauty of VKS is not only that it is very simple to deploy, but now I can go ahead and make changes to this as well, really, really simply, again, from my kind of environment. So if I go to the cluster, let's say that I have now decided that, I deployed this with one replica of my worker node, but actually I wanted two. So I can very easily go in here and I can just change that number to two replicas, or I could change the size. Doesn't matter. I will save this. And when we go back to our vSphere, we will see it will take just quickly to reconcile. And then we will see that it will basically kick off an operation where, as we can see now, it's pulling that image version, again, fetching it and deploying another worker node. So you can always kind of like see behind the scenes what's actually happening if you do have access to vCenter. So if you are in that role that has also the admin side to it. From the consumer perspective, again, they can watch these operations in their kind of like space with just monitoring what is happening on the cluster. We do have cluster health status. We do have events. They can monitor it that way. Another way you were able to see it, for example, if we go back to our VCF CLI and go back to that production namespace, because that is where the cluster is deployed. If I do VCF cluster list, these are my 3 clusters. I can see that my cluster is updating. But if I want to know specifically, I can do VCF cluster get, production on that cluster, and this will give me even more information. So I can see that there's currently a change going on because there's a second machine being deployed for my another worker. We can see the status. It started the provisioning. It's waiting for that to become available. So again, depending on your preference, you do have really good visibility into what's happening inside. Right. So we have deployed a cluster with some basic settings. I want to quickly cover some of the other ones as well. The one thing that I want to mention, and this is probably in the tip category, as I have mentioned in the beginning, the idea of us releasing VKS so rapidly in new service versions is to be able to give you this the latest kind of experience, which comes with also new functionality. But in order to be able to reflect that in places like maybe our user interface, which gets deployed as part of your VCF stack, well, is a little bit tricky sometimes. So there are a lot of things that are kind of decoupled from this space. And when it comes to user interfaces, we also have this kind of local version, if you have access to vCenter, that you can use, which is called local consumption interface. So it's exactly the same user interface, just deployed kind of as a plugin in your vSphere client. And because we can give you that one async, and as soon as we can, you can also update it to the latest version and see maybe some of the newer functionality before it comes to the other UIs. So I wanted to show you that quickly because it it's really nice to see. So if I go to a different vSphere namespace here, so for example, here I have development because I don't want to be in here. If I go to manage, as you can see, I can see all of my services. Let's go to create cluster. And what you will see here is that I can create, again, custom, but in here I will see some new things. So first of all, one thing I'd like to also mention for VKS clusters, every version of VKS, the service itself, introduces a version of cluster class. Cluster class in Kubernetes space in Cluster API is something that basically defines the make of the cluster. And the reason why this is versioned is that when you update the service to a new version, you don't necessarily want to update all of your clusters at the same time. So this kind of like prevents that from happening because they will stay on that version until you decide to do an upgrade specifically. So we can see, again, the versions here. So 3.6 is being the latest with that latest Kubernetes release. But some cool things I wanted to show you, for example, in here is that if we go to that control plane, again, let's just say we're doing one. Let's keep that as it was. We don't have to deal with that, but with node pools, for example, here you can see that we're already creating one node pool for you automatically. But what we can do as well is that, for example, because with these releases, we are configuring something like cluster autoscaler automatically, I can use the user interface to enable this functionality. And what this means is, let me make this smaller, is that I can even scale down to 0. So what I can say here is that, hey, deploy a cluster for me, but it's only going to have a control plane until I decide to actually deploy some workloads on there. So this is really cool, but obviously you can use different numbers. I could also, again, change the sizing, the operating systems. So for my worker nodes, it's either Photon or Ubuntu that we distribute. But you can also, for example, if you have Windows containers, you can create your own Windows images and then use those to create your work nodes. You can also do other things, like if you would need more volumes, you can add it here. You can configure those taints or labels. So, for example, I can say auto scalar on. This is just a key value pair for my label. So if I want to use that somewhere. Okay, so let me finish this. And what I wanted to show you as well is that we can add additional worker node pools as well into this cluster configuration. So, for example, if I want to create another node pool with, let's say, different sizing, I can do that and add that into my configuration. So if I go in here, I would be able to do more of them. But just to keep this simple, I will just go next and go finish. And I'm just checking how we are on time because we have lots to cover. Okay, live environment, I remember that. I'll just get rid of this. This will now start deploying. Let's go. We've been covering VKS quite a bit. I want to show you the experience with virtual machines as well quickly. So in my virtual machines, same user interface. If I go to create, you will see that the process is very similar for my virtual machine. I'm deciding to do this from a template. I'm going to deploy just a very simple Ubuntu VM that I call CLI, which has all of my kind of tools configured that I like to use in my lab environment. It's a good example. So I'm going to select an image for it. I'm going to give it resources. And then I can use some of the other things that you would see in Kubernetes, like assigning some persistent volume for it, or, for example, adding a load balancer in front of it. So I like to change the name. And then in my name, I can create a load balancer to open port 22 on this VM, so I can then later on log into it. And then I can fully configure this virtual machine. So I'm not just deploying a blank virtual machine, then logging in, then doing my configuration, doing other things. I'm using a proper kind of cloud way of defining my VM, but defining my full configuration. Because this is Ubuntu, I will use raw configuration. And I do have my cloud config here, which I will show you, but very quickly creates a user and does some basic configuration, install some of my basic tools like kubectl, the VCF, CLI, and some other tools that I like to use. And again, I can do network configuration on this. For example, if I want to add DNS into my configuration, if I don't have it in the base, I can add it here. And again, everything has been defined for me for all of those things that I'm passing through. So not just the VM, but also the secret that defines the config map and also the load balancer. Then download all of these and just go ahead and deploy this VM. Ooh, I'm just, 5 minutes. So this is going to be really fast, but we have another session upcoming, so we can steal some of the time as well. But this is deploying. This is my virtual machine. And the other thing I wanted to show you is that, as you can see, so far I'm doing everything in the user interface. Everything is the same experience and so on. And as I mentioned, you can take the principles of this and what the system is giving you, like, for example, those YAML manifests that are created for me, and use it for other purposes, like GitOps. So, for example, what I can do is I want to quickly show you ArgoCD, and I'll just kick off that deployment, and during the break, it will run. But I have an ArgoCD instance deployed here. I will cover how to enable the service in the next session. And I can create a simple application that will be created. For GitOps, you need some Git repo. For purposes of my lab, I use Gitty, which is like a local version of a Git repo. I've created a nice repo for our use case. And what I can do is I can add some files. And the easiest thing to do is all those files that I have downloaded. So if I go to my downloads, I can look at them, I can export them, and I can then just very quickly use them for the deployment. So for example, if I would want to do the virtual machine as well here, just to show that it's not just about Kubernetes, I can do it. The one thing that I would like to remove is definition of my namespace, just to make sure that it doesn't force it to go to a specific namespace. So if I look at all of these, remove my namespaces from here. Just to do this very quickly, because and I can delete it here as well very quickly. So I'm saving this, and then I can go into my repo here, add my files. Upload my file, and just go, what was I doing here? Here, upload those as well. Maybe I want to also upload a cluster that I was deploying before, so I could do that as well as a test. And then I'll quickly cancel this and do a commit message, which we don't have time for, so we'll just do this. And now I have a Git repo with a location. I can, in ArgoCD, create an application called demo, and I'll just kick this off, and then we are going for a break. So I'll just do automatic policy, and I'll explain what is happening once we come back, so you don't have to worry about that. Specifying my source and my destination, which is that supervisor cluster, and I want this to go to the test namespace. I'm just going to copy that. And I'll just kick this off. So I've done basically very quick definition of, hey, can you please take these files from this source and go sync it as a desired state to my environment. And that's what that is currently happening. If we go to inventory, into test, we will start seeing that there are things that will get deployed. You can see it's fetching the image and our VM is being created. So this was first part of the lab. I know we're wrapping up. So I will stop this here. Please, we'll go for a quick break, I know, but then we will be back with part 2. So I will come back to this very quickly, and then we can continue to wrap up the day. Thank you for now.
Thanks, Katarina. We appreciate it. That was really great technical content and excited for part 2. We'll resume in about 9 minutes for the next session. So you have a little bit of a longer break for this one. And we'll be right back. So I'm going to kick everyone to the lobby and we'll see you in a couple minutes.
See you soon.